Welcome to The Whole Truth on ActonTV. I'm Simon Cataldo, your state representative in the 14th Middlesex District. Today we're going to be talking about consumer protection. And on this show, we try to take it right to the top and make sure that you're hearing from the experts on whatever subject matter we are covering. Consumer protection has been in the news on the state and federal level, and it's something that can affect all of us, can certainly affect the elderly, can affect parents, can affect kids. So we are going to hear today from the person that Attorney General Andrea Campbell has tapped to be the chief of the Consumer Protection Bureau, our statewide expert, Yael Shavit. Yael, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we're going to get a little bit into your background, which I think is really interesting. But first, just tell us, why consumer protection? Why is that something that the Attorney General's office has a focus on?
Sure. So consumer protection affects everyone. We are all consumers, and people will engage in consumer transactions usually multiple times a day. So it touches on a lot of different facets of life. It touches on housing, transportation, what you're able to purchase for your children, the extra costs that you might bear that you're not aware of. So it can really affect people's finances and people's economic stability. At the AG's office, one of the core strategic priorities for the Attorney General is making sure that we're advancing economic opportunity and consumer justice for everyone. And at the heart of that work is the office's consumer protection work.
That's a really practical perspective, and I want to drill farther down into that, because I think that one of the, from bird's eye view, one of the interesting aspects of your bureau is that it interacts a little bit differently with the general public, perhaps, than other sections. So if somebody thinks that they've been aggrieved in some way, how would they interact with the bureau?
Great. So our office tackles consumer protection in a few different ways. The division that I'm the chief of is the Consumer Protection Division, and we're an enforcement division. Massachusetts has some of the strongest consumer protection laws in the country. Chief among them is Chapter 93A, which prohibits unfair and deceptive acts and practices in trade and commerce. And that law gives the Attorney General's office the power to initiate an investigation anytime the Attorney General believes that someone is engaging in or is about to engage in violations of the law. So we tackle investigations and enforcement. But we have another division in the office called the Consumer Advocacy and Response Division. We lovingly call them CARD, and they're the ones that field consumer complaints. So if a consumer believes that they've been subject to unfair or deceptive conduct, they can just file a complaint with our office, and I really encourage people to do that. It's really straightforward. You're going to hear me repeat a URL twice so that people actually know it.
And we're going to put it on the screen as well.
Perfect. Yes. Love that. But so people can file a complaint, and we have an entire division that works to try and assist those people in getting good resolutions to those complaints. And they will reach back out to the consumers who filed the complaints to work with them. And then I'll also flag that in addition to the enforcement work and the consumer assistance, we do a lot of consumer education, a lot of know your rights type of publications. We put out a few guides in different areas that are designed both to help consumers understand some complicated areas of law, but also to help businesses comply with the law.
All right, so
I'm going to say that URL.
Reveal. Yeah,
okay.
Say the URL.
All right, I'm going to say it and spell it. It's mass.gov/AGO. That's mass.gov/AGO. And if you get to that landing page, there will be a link that's easy to follow that says submit consumer complaint or something to that effect, and it's a really straightforward process.
Give us some examples. What might happen to somebody, or what might somebody see that should cause them to think about contacting the office?
Sure. If you think that you overpaid for something, if you had an understanding of what the price might be, and then when you actually have to pay, you realize that you've paid more than you thought you did, that might be an example that something happened in that transaction that shouldn't have. If you didn't get what you thought you were buying, if you didn't get what you paid for, if suddenly someone comes and demands that you pay additional money after a transaction is over, those are some examples of areas where you may well have been subjected to an unfair or deceptive act or practice as a consumer.
And I just want to loop back to one thing you said, which I think many folks who aren't familiar with consumer protection law or haven't been part of litigation may not know, is that in Massachusetts, we have something called Chapter 93A. It actually causes a lot of people to decide to litigate in Massachusetts if they have venue and jurisdiction to do that, because we have strong consumer protection laws relative to other states, which I think probably gives your office a lot of teeth to go after cases that are worthy of seeking justice in. So let's talk a little bit about your personal background, Yael, because I think it's interesting, and I think that a lot of times, you know, when folks watch the show and we have experts on, they want to know how somebody came to this point in their career. Can you tell me a little bit about your professional path?
Absolutely. My interest in consumer protection started pretty early. When I left college, I took a job at the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston, and I was there in 2008 during the financial crisis and during the subprime mortgage crisis, and observed the wave of foreclosures that was taking over the country and the Commonwealth and really causing a lot of financial devastation for families, especially for families who really thought that they were doing everything they needed to do to secure their family's economic future. And that made me decide to go back to school, to law school in particular, to pursue consumer protection work, specifically in areas where information imbalances could cause people, consumers, to become really vulnerable to financial devastation. And in law school, I thought I wanted to focus on policy, but I got sort of connected to a legal clinic that made me realize that I actually liked litigation. And after I graduated, I had a clerkship, a couple of fellowships, including one in Boston at the National Consumer Law Center, which was really, had the effect of deepening my interest in consumer law. And I was fortunate that the stars sort of aligned for me, and in 2016, after that fellowship, I joined the Attorney General's office in the Consumer Protection Division as an Assistant Attorney General under then General Healy. And 2 years ago, I was honored to be named by General Campbell to run that division.
So just going back to law school for a second, you went to Yale.
I did.
I've heard of it. And then after that, you clerked. And
Yes.
I get a lot of questions, as you may as well, from aspiring or current law school students about why to do a clerkship. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, you really get to see behind the scenes how the decisions are made and how judges think about the legal issues that come before them. People can clerk on a trial court or an appellate court, very different experiences. I clerked on an appellate court, and it's a real crash course in legal writing and legal reasoning. So, I think there are probably a lot of different reasons people choose to do it. For me, really the experience of being able to put myself in the judge's shoes and think the way a judge might think was a really good education for then, a legal career where you're trying to persuade judges that, your position is the correct one, and also certainly made me a better writer.
So you've mentioned some Massachusetts specific kind of how we have a big focus on that in the state, both in terms of the AG's office, but also in the nonprofit sector. And federally, of course, there's Massachusetts roots with the CFPB. Mm-hmm. And there's some change happening now at the federal level in a lot of different areas, including potentially with the CFPB and otherwise. And I'm wondering, has your work changed at all? Has the AG's approach changed at all with a new federal administration? Does that happen from time to time anyway? How do you see that dynamic playing out?
Sure. So, unfortunately, with the change of administration, our federal partners can't necessarily be relied on right now to be doing the type of consumer protection work they'd previously been doing or playing that same role. The way that manifests for us in our division is by adding a consideration to the decision-making process that we'd be going through anyway, as we're thinking about how can we best prioritize our work to achieve the Attorney General's strategic priorities. So, without going into specifics, if there's an area of consumer protection law where previously the CFPB was very active and filled that space, if they're not active in that way now, then that adds an additional consideration for us. Do we need to fill that role for consumers in Massachusetts to make sure that they're protected? But what I'll say is that at the end of the day, even before the change of administration, our office was a nation leader in our consumer protection work and really committed to making sure that consumers in the Commonwealth are protected and aren't subject to harm, and that hasn't changed. The change, as I mentioned, just sort of affects the consideration of what are those areas of consumer protection law where we really need to be focusing our resources.
So perhaps unlike other areas of law, it sounds like there are parts of consumer protection law that could be prosecuted or pursued at the state level, but also at the federal level. And so there's a choice to be made there in certain instances. Is that more or less right?
Yes, that is right. And, there are certain federal consumer protection laws that states have the authority to enforce.
Okay.
One thing that's nice about our consumer protection law in Massachusetts is that in addition to, being a law of broad applicability that generally takes the position that unfair and deceptive conduct in trade and commerce is impermissible, it's also a per se violation of our consumer protection law to violate another consumer protection law. So if you have an actor that is violating a specific federal consumer protection law, that may constitute a violation of Chapter 93A. So we could still prosecute that in state court under our state consumer protection law.
So let's take it back to the URL again. Could you tell us one more time?
mass.gov/AGO.
All right, so if you go onto that URL, and we're going to actually put it on the screen so people can see not just the URL, but can see what the landing page looks like. So let's say I go on there and I submit a complaint or some information into the form. What could I expect to happen after that?
You get outreach from our office regarding the complaint. If it's the type of complaint that our office is able to assist with, then that process will continue. There's language on the complaint form itself notifying people that, we may need to use this information to be able to help resolve your complaint. And then you'll work with our office, with whoever reaches out, to try and get that complaint resolved. And sometimes it may be that there are external resources that would be helpful, even if it's something our office can't directly help with, and those resources would be provided so that people know where else they can look as well.
And what if the person who's submitting the complaint is not necessarily a victim, but more like a whistleblower, somebody who's working within a company that sees that the company's taking advantage of the elderly, or there's some scam that's integrated into the business model or something like that? Are there any types of protections for someone who may be concerned about losing their job or being found out or something like that?
So I don't want to overstate my knowledge of the particular nature of the whistleblower protections. There are contexts in which there might be, and then there are contexts in which there aren't. One thing that I will say is we really do rely on the public to provide information to our office that we can use to understand the trends that are happening and what people are facing. I think if someone is concerned about what the consequence might be to them for reaching out, it makes sense to speak with a lawyer and just get a little bit of advice about whether or not they can do that. And our office is not in a position is not able to provide legal advice ourselves. But I will say, there are kind of two reasons to submit a consumer complaint to our office from my perspective. One is so that we can try and help a consumer with their complaint, but the other is to help notify the office, as you were suggesting, of what's happening, what people are seeing on the ground. And our division, our enforcement division, certainly looks at trends and tries to take that into consideration as we're deciding, what requires action on the part of our office in the Commonwealth.
In the enforcement division, who's doing the investigatory work? Is it all the assistant attorney generals? Are there state police? Are there agents? Who's doing all that?
So for us on the civil side, we work with a really great group of attorneys and paralegals and interns. We also have a separate investigation division that help us with our investigations. And we also work closely with the card division, the one that I mentioned, to learn about what people are seeing and what they're hearing when they're speaking to folks. So, even beyond that, we do a lot of cross-divisional work as well. And so it's a big group effort.
Yeah.
But it's, really folks in the office, feet on the ground, and working through the complicated issues.
I had the opportunity to intern when I was in college in the criminal bureau. And what I took away from that was a really great sense of camaraderie within the office. It's a big floor. There's a lot of people working there. Attorneys next to paralegals, next to the state police wiretap room, all these different things going on in proximity. And it seemed like a great place to work. It was a great place to intern. And it's somewhere where I always, when there are aspiring lawyers, I always encourage them to apply for internships. I think there's a good program there. You're at the vanguard of this work. Tell us a little bit about what we should be looking out for.
Sure. So as I said, we're consumers in every aspect of our lives, right? So the work that we do and the places where people might see things come up for them touch on, housing, stability and access, transportation affordability, your rights as a debtor and as a borrower. And, just speaking to our work, we do landlord-tenant work to make sure that tenants aren't being asked to pay fees they shouldn't have to pay, that they're not being forced to live in conditions that aren't appropriate conditions. If you're seeing things like that in your life, consider submitting a complaint to our office or going onto our website to look at some of the consumer materials to help people learn their rights. We have landlord-tenant guides that can be really helpful in that context. Similarly, if you're having a hard time getting in touch with a loan servicer, that shouldn't happen, right? And if you're having a tough time making payments, if the terms are not what you thought that you agreed to, another place to look out and maybe reach out to our office. One area that I think maybe I'm speaking for myself personally, seen a little bit of an uptick is in the context of consumer loans where they seem a little too good to be true, and maybe the companies that are offering them are taking the position that they're not loans to try and avoid the very strong regulations that we have in the Commonwealth. So there are some red flags that I would encourage consumers to look out for. If you're being rushed, if you're making an important financial decision and you're being told you got to do this now, this is a time-limited offer, if you don't tell us in the next few minutes, in the next couple of days, it's gone. Take a beat and ask yourself why you're being rushed through this process and make sure you're taking the time to understand it fully. If you're asking to see documents and you're not being given documents to review before you're supposed to sign on the dotted line, that's another red flag. You should be able to look at everything, make sure you understand it, show it to a friend, a family member, a lawyer, and make sure that you understand the implications for you. And also, if it sounds too good to be true, often it is. So if someone is offering you a large amount of money up front, but they're telling you it's not a loan, or they're telling you maybe you don't need to repay it, or you don't need to repay it for a long time, stop and ask, what is this product actually? And what does it mean for me down the line? When will I need to repay it? Will I be able to then? Those are the types of questions to ask in areas where I think you can see efforts to try and use potentially misleading marketing to get people to enter into financial transactions.
Yeah, I sit on the Joint Committee on Financial Services in the legislature, and hearing after hearing, we hear about horror stories of the type of conduct and victimization that you're describing now. I think it's really a partnership between the legislature and the AG's office and the nonprofit organizations that help victims or potential victims. Sometimes it seems like a game of whack-a-mole because companies or people who have malicious intent are constantly finding new ways. So I really appreciate what you're doing to stay at the tip of the spear on this work. I think it's probably obvious to some, maybe not others, that you're somebody based on your professional and academic background who could have gone into any line of legal work. One of the amazing things about Massachusetts is we have a lot of public servants, including in state government, I'd say especially in state government, that could have done anything and chosen to go into public service law. So I'd like you to give the pitch. If somebody's watching this who's got a 3.9 GPA and aced their LSAT and is going to go to a great law school like you did, and is going to get recruited by all the top law firms. You obviously made a very intentional, thoughtful decision to do this line of work. So just want to get your reflection, maybe even some advocacy about
Sure.
why you chose that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, we're really fortunate in Massachusetts to have really active state government that is working daily to protect people and to do meaningful work. And it's really a privilege, particularly under this AG, to get to do this type of cutting edge work and difficult work. And you get to do it with people who are really committed to serving the public and to seeing results for other people from the work that they're doing. And it's really interesting. We get to work on a large variety of issues, to be responsive to what's happening in the Commonwealth, to see the impact of the work that we're doing, and to do it with other people who are really motivated by the same thing. So, I haven't thought twice, been in the office for almost a decade at this point, and every day feels exciting and important, which is one of the really great things of getting to do this work where we do it.
And not to be taken for granted. Yael, Shavit, I'm so grateful that you took the time to come on the show to tell the people the URL that you're going to tell them one more time.
Absolutely, and I'm not going to get it wrong. mass.gov/AGO.
And I sleep better at night knowing that you and your colleagues are out there helping to protect me and my neighbors and my community. Thank you so much for your service, and thanks again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for highlighting consumer protection work.
I was happy to do that, and maybe we'll do it again. This has been The Whole Truth on ActonTV. Thank you so much for joining us. Visit the AGO's website and learn more about what you can do to make sure that the office knows what's going on in the community and anything that's concerning as it concerns consumer protection. Thank you so much for watching.